The autumn wind cut through Maya Rodriguez's worn denim jacket as she stepped off the Greyhound bus at the Central State University campus in Columbus, Ohio. At 19, she carried everything she owned in 2 battered suitcases and a backpack that had seen better days. The weight of her mother's tears from that morning still pressed against her chest. Along with the crumpled $20 bill Rosa Rodriguez had pressed into her palm, the last of their savings after paying for Maya's bus ticket. Central State University sprawled before her like a concrete promise, its red brick buildings and tree-lined pathways nothing like the gleaming Instagram posts she'd seen from her high school classmates at Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. The campus buzzed with the energy of move-in day, parents in luxury SUVs unloading designer luggage and mini fridges, their children clutching acceptance letters to prestigious schools like trophies. Maya pulled her phone from her pocket, the screen cracked from when she'd dropped it working her summer job at the local diner. 3 new notifications from her high school group chat lit up the damaged display. Just moved into my Harvard dorm. Can't believe I'm actually here. Crimson Pride. Yale orientation is incredible. Already met so many amazing people from around the world. Stanford weather is perfect. This is going to be the best 4 years ever. Each message felt like a small knife twist. Maya had applied to those same schools, her 4.0 GPA and perfect SAT scores making her believe she had a chance. The rejection letters had arrived like clockwork, thin envelopes with polite words about competitive applicant pools and limited spaces. The guidance counselor at her struggling public high school had shrugged sympathetically. These elite schools prefer diversity that comes with donations, she'd said with brutal honesty. Central State University had offered Maya a full academic scholarship covering tuition, room, and board. It wasn't glamorous, but it was her ticket out of the Rust Belt town where her mother cleaned office buildings at night, and her father worked double shifts at the auto plant before his heart attack took him during Maya's junior year of high school. Tewi. Dormitory lobby smelled like industrial disinfectant and new carpeting. Maya's roommate Jessica was already settled in, her side of the room decorated with photos from her gap year in Europe. Jessica's parents were professors at a small liberal arts college, her privileged background evident in her casual confidence and expensive organic bedding. "So where are you from?" Jessica asked, her tone friendly but appraising. "East Cleveland," Maya replied, unpacking her single-fitted sheet, the same one she'd used since middle school. "Oh, cool. Urban experience. That's so authentic." Jessica's smile was genuine but revealed an otherness that Maya would encounter repeatedly over the coming months. To Jessica, Maya's poverty was interesting, even admirable in an abstract way, but not something she could truly understand. Maya's first literature class was held in Hammond Hall, an imposing building that seemed to echo with decades of academic tradition. Professor Williams, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, stood at the front of the lecture hall addressing the 70 students scattered across the tiered seating. "Literature," Professor Williams began, "is not about pretty words or clever metaphors. It's about understanding the human condition, examining the systems that shape our lives, and giving voice to experiences that might otherwise remain silent." Maya found herself leaning forward, her notebook already open, pen poised to capture every word. Around her, other students checked their phones, whispered about weekend plans, or dozed in the warm afternoon light filtering through tall windows. But Maya hung on every syllable, recognizing something in Professor Williams' words that spoke directly to her own experience. "Who can tell me what we mean when we talk about marginalized voices in literature?" Professor Williams asked. Maya's hand shot up before she could second-guess herself. Stories told by people who society doesn't usually listen to, people who don't have platforms or connections, but whose experiences matter just as much as anyone else's. Professor Williams's eyes lit up with interest. "Excellent. And why might these voices be particularly important in contemporary American fiction?" "Because they show the reality behind the American dream," Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. "They reveal the gap between what we're told is possible and what actually happens when you don't start with advantages." A few students turned to look at Maya with mild curiosity, but most remained disengaged. For them, Discussions of class and privilege were academic exercises, not lived realities. After class, Maya lingered, organizing her notes while other students filed out, already making dinner plans and discussing their weekend social calendars. Professor Williams approached her desk. "That was insightful commentary, Ms. Rodriguez." Maya Rodriguez. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'd like to see you during my office hours this week. I think you might benefit from some additional reading recommendations." Maya felt a flutter of excitement mixed with anxiety. She'd never been singled out by a teacher for positive attention. Her high school had been too overwhelmed and understaffed for much individual mentorship. Walking back to her dormitory, Maya passed groups of students heading to Greek life recruitment events, their conversations filled with references to family connections and summer homes. She overheard two girls discussing their father's business partnerships, their mother's charity work, their own internships at companies where family friends served on boards of directors. The contrast with her own background felt stark. Maya's mother had worked 2 jobs to keep their family afloat after her father's death, cleaning offices downtown and working weekends at a laundromat. Maya herself had worked since she was 15, babysitting, waitressing, tutoring younger students for pocket change. The idea of unpaid internships or gap years traveling through Europe belonged to a world she'd only observed from the outside. That evening, Maya called her mother from the cramped phone booth in her dormitory's basement, the only place she could get reliable cell service. "Mija, how was your first day?" Rose's voice carried exhaustion from her own 12-hour shift, but also eager anticipation. "It was good, Mama. I like my literature professor. She wants to meet with me about extra reading." "That's wonderful, baby. Your father would be so proud." Rose's voice caught slightly. "You're doing what we always dreamed of, getting that education, making something better for yourself." Maya closed her eyes, pressing the phone closer to her ear. "I miss him, Mama. I wish he could see this." "He can see it, Mija, and he knows you're going to do great things." After hanging up, Maya walked back to her room where Jessica was video chatting with high school friends, their conversations peppered with names of exclusive colleges and references to shared experiences at elite prep schools. Maya settled at her desk, opening her literature textbook to begin the first assigned reading. The text was challenging, dense with academic language and cultural references that felt foreign to her working-class background. But Maya attacked it with the same determination that had gotten her through high school while working part-time jobs and caring for her grieving mother. She read each page twice, looking up unfamiliar terms and taking detailed notes that would later prove invaluable. As October deepened into November, Maya established a routine that would define her college experience. She woke at 5 a.m. to work her shift at the campus library, checking out books and helping students with research before her morning classes. Her afternoons were spent in lecture halls and discussion sections, where she gradually gained recognition for her thoughtful contributions and unique perspectives. Professor Williams had indeed provided Maya with additional reading lists, introducing her to authors like James Baldwin, Sandra Cisneros, and Tobias Wolff, writers who explored themes of class, identity, and social mobility that resonated deeply with Maya's own experience. Their office meetings became weekly appointments, with Professor Williams serving as both mentor and intellectual guide. "You have a natural instinct for literary analysis," Professor Williams told Maya during one of their sessions. "But more than that, you bring a perspective that's often missing from academic discussions. Don't let anyone convince you that your background is a disadvantage. It's actually your greatest strength." Maya treasured these words, especially during moments when she felt most isolated from her peers. While other students complained about dining hall food, Maya was grateful for regular meals. While classmates stressed about choosing between multiple spring break destinations, Maya planned to spend the week working double shifts at the library to save money for textbooks. The social divide became most apparent during weekend gatherings. Maya would watch from her dormitory window as groups of students piled into cars for trips to Cleveland's trendy neighborhoods, their conversations filled with casual references to expensive restaurants and exclusive clubs. She'd been invited a few times, but the cost of keeping up, cover charges, drinks, Meals at places where entrees cost more than Maya's weekly food budget made these invitations feel more like reminders of what she couldn't afford than genuine social opportunities. Instead, Maya spent her weekends in the library, diving deeper into the authors Professor Williams had recommended. She discovered a whole literary world she'd never known existed, stories that reflected her own struggles with economic uncertainty, family sacrifice, and the complex navigation of spaces where she didn't quite belong. Her first semester grades arrived in December, 4 A's and 1 A-. Maya stared at the transcript, hardly believing the evidence of her academic success. She'd not only survived her first semester at Central State University, she'd excelled in ways that surprised even herself. The winter break brought her back to East Cleveland, where the familiar sights of her neighborhood, boarded-up storefronts, struggling families, the constant undertone of economic desperation, reminded her why education felt like both an escape and a responsibility. Her mother had framed Maya's high school graduation photo and placed it on the mantel next to her father's picture, creating a small shrine to the family's hopes and dreams. "You look different," Rosa observed as they sat in their small kitchen, sharing a simple dinner. "More confident." Maya nodded, recognizing the truth in her mother's words. Despite the social challenges and financial constraints, she'd found something at Central State University that she'd never experienced before: intellectual stimulation, academic recognition, and the beginning of a sense that she might actually belong in the world of higher education. As she prepared to return for her second semester, Maya felt a quiet determination settling in her chest. Her high school classmates might be posting glamorous photos from their prestigious universities, but Maya had discovered something more valuable than social status. She'd found her voice, her passion, and her purpose. The girl who'd been dismissed for choosing a nobody public university was just beginning to understand her own power. By the spring of her senior year at Central State University, Maya Rodriguez had transformed from a hesitant scholarship student into an academic powerhouse. Her transcript gleamed with a 3.97 GPA, her thesis on Voices from the Margins, Economic Class in Contemporary American Fiction, had earned departmental honors, and Professor Williams had become not just a mentor, but a fierce advocate for Maya's intellectual potential. The library had become Maya's second home over the past 4 years. She knew every corner of the stacks, every quiet study nook, every computer terminal that wouldn't randomly shut down during finals week. Her work-study position had evolved from basic shelving duties to research assistance for faculty members, giving her experience that most undergraduates never received. Dr. Patricia Chen, the head librarian, had written Maya a glowing recommendation letter, noting her exceptional research skills and intellectual curiosity that rivals graduate students. But as graduation approached, Maya faced the daunting reality of her next steps. Graduate school had always been the plan, the logical continuation of her academic journey, and her ticket to the kind of career that could lift her family permanently out of poverty. The challenge lay in gaining admission to programs that could provide the credentials and connections necessary for a successful academic career. Maya's laptop, now 4 years old and held together with electrical tape, displayed 17 different graduate program applications in various stages of completion. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Stanford, the same institutions that had rejected her undergraduate applications now represented her dreams for advanced study. This time, she told herself, things would be different. She had proven herself academically, earned faculty support, and demonstrated the kind of intellectual growth that graduate programs claimed to value. Professor Williams had been frank about the challenges ahead. "Maya, you're one of the most promising students I've encountered in 25 years of teaching," she'd said during one of their weekly meetings. "But you need to understand that graduate admissions operate differently than undergraduate admissions. It's not just about grades and test scores, it's about fit, funding, and unfortunately, sometimes about factors that have nothing to do with academic merit." The GRE preparation had consumed Maya's summer between junior and senior year. While her classmates enjoyed internships and family vacations, Maya worked 40 hours a week at a local bookstore and spent her evenings with prep books purchased used online. The $200 test fee represented a significant financial investment for her family money that could have covered groceries for a month. She couldn't afford to take it multiple times like many of her peers. Her personal statement had gone through dozens of revisions, each draft carefully crafted to tell her story without sounding like a plea for sympathy. How do you explain to admissions committees that your perspective on literature comes from lived experience with the very social issues you want to study? How do you convince professors at elite institutions that your background is an asset rather than a deficit? I am drawn to graduate study in English literature not despite my working-class background, but because of it, Maya had written in her final draft. Literature has been my window into understanding how economic inequality shapes not just individual lives, but entire communities. I want to contribute to scholarship that examines these intersections with both rigor and authenticity. The recommendation letters were perhaps her strongest asset. Professor Williams had written what she privately described as the most enthusiastic letter of my career, highlighting Maya's unique perspective and exceptional analytical abilities. Dr. James Morrison from the philosophy department, where Maya had taken several courses as electives, emphasized her ability to bridge disciplines and think critically about complex social issues. Even Dr. Chen's letter from the library spoke to Maya's research skills and work ethic. But Maya knew that letters from Central State University faculty, however glowing, carried less weight than recommendations from professors at prestigious institutions. The informal networks that connected elite schools remained largely closed to students from public universities, especially those without family connections to academic circles. The waiting period stretched from December through March, each day bringing a mixture of hope and anxiety. Maya refreshed her email obsessively, checking for updates from admissions offices. Her first response came from Princeton, a thin envelope that she already knew contained rejection before opening it. Due to the highly competitive nature of our program, the form letter began. Harvard followed 2 days later, then Yale, then Stanford. Each rejection felt like a personal judgment, despite Professor Williams' repeated assurances that graduate admissions were notoriously arbitrary and often unfair. Maya began to understand that her undergraduate achievements, impressive as they were within the context of Central State University, weren't enough to overcome the systemic advantages of applicants from elite institutions. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Jennifer Chen at Northwestern University had discovered Maya's work through a conference paper that Professor Williams had encouraged her to submit. Maya's analysis of economic themes in contemporary fiction had caught Dr. Chen's attention, particularly her argument that working-class voices were systematically excluded from literary canons, not due to lack of merit, but due to barriers in publishing and academic institutions. Your writing sample demonstrates exactly the kind of fresh perspective our program needs, Dr. Chen had written in an email that Maya read 17 times before believing it was real. I'd like to schedule a video interview to discuss your research interests and potential fit with our department. The interview took place on a Tuesday evening in Maya's dormitory room, her roommate Jessica diplomatically studying in the library to provide privacy. Maya had prepared extensively, researching Northwestern's faculty, recent dissertations, and department philosophy. But Dr. Chen's questions went beyond typical academic topics. Tell me about a time when your background gave you insight that others might have missed, Dr. Chen asked, her voice warm but probing through the computer screen. Maya paused, considering her response carefully. Last semester, I was in a seminar discussing Tobias Wolff's This Boy's Life. Most of my classmates focused on the literary techniques and narrative structure. But I kept thinking about the economic instability that drives every major plot point. The mother's desperate search for financial security. The way poverty shapes the protagonist's choices and worldview. When I brought this up, it opened an entirely new discussion about how class intersects with identity formation. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of analysis that makes scholarship stronger. Too often we discuss literature as if it exists in a vacuum, divorced from the material conditions that shape both characters and readers. The conversation flowed naturally from there, covering everything from Maya's thesis research to her career goals to her thoughts on the current state of American literary studies. By the end of the hour-long interview, Maya felt more intellectually stimulated than she had in months. Northwestern's acceptance letter arrived on a gray March morning, accompanied by an offer of a teaching assistantship that would cover tuition and provide a modest stipend for living expenses. Maya stared at the computer screen in disbelief, reading the words over and over. "We are pleased to offer you admission to our PhD program in English literature, beginning fall 2019. Her mother's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Rosa Rodriguez had never heard of Northwestern University, but she understood that her daughter had achieved something extraordinary. "Mija, you did it," she whispered through tears during their phone call. "You actually did it." The celebration was brief, however, as Maya began to understand the practical implications of her acceptance. The teaching assistantship would provide $22,000 per year, barely enough to cover rent, food, and basic necessities in Evanston, Illinois. There would be no money for emergencies, no safety net, and certainly no funds to help her mother, who was now cleaning offices 6 days a week to make ends meet alone. Maya's undergraduate friends from Central State were pursuing various paths after graduation. Some had landed entry-level jobs with decent salaries and benefits. Others were taking gap years to figure out their next steps, and a few were entering master's programs that would lead directly to stable careers. The PhD path Maya had chosen offered no such guarantees. 5 to 7 years of poverty-level income, followed by an increasingly competitive job market where tenure-track positions were becoming ever more scarce. But Maya had also seen the statistics about social mobility and graduate education. Despite the immediate financial hardship, a doctoral degree represented her best chance at breaking the cycle of economic instability that had defined her family's life. More than that, it was her opportunity to contribute to conversations about class, education, and opportunity from a perspective that was often missing from academic discourse. The summer before starting at Northwestern, Maya worked 3 jobs to save every possible dollar. She waitressed at a restaurant downtown, tutored students preparing for standardized tests, and continued her library position at Central State. Her days began at 6 a.m. and ended near midnight, but each dollar earned represented security during the lean graduate school years ahead. Moving to Evanston in late August, Maya felt the familiar mixture of excitement and intimidation that had characterized her transition to Central State 4 years earlier. But this time, the stakes felt higher. Northwestern University was a different caliber of institution, with resources, expectations, and social dynamics that would challenge her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Her studio apartment was tiny and expensive, located in a building that had seen better decades. The rent consumed nearly half of her monthly stipend, leaving little for food, transportation, or emergencies. Maya's furniture consisted of a mattress on the floor, a folding table that served as both desk and dining area, and a single chair. She'd found on Craigslist. The graduate student orientation revealed the extent of her differences from her new cohort. Maya's fellow doctoral students came from backgrounds that were becoming familiar: prestigious undergraduate institutions, family connections to academia, financial support that allowed them to focus entirely on their studies. Several mentioned unpaid research internships at major universities, summer programs in Europe, and gap years spent traveling or volunteering in exotic locations. "Where did you do your undergraduate work?" asked Jonathan, a tall student with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch. His CV listed degrees from Williams College and internships at major publishing houses that Maya knew were virtually impossible to obtain without connections. "Central State University in Ohio," Maya replied, watching for the flicker of confusion or dismissal that she'd learned to expect. "Oh, interesting. I'm not familiar with that program," Jonathan said with the polite smile that Maya recognized as academic code for "never heard of it" and "probably not impressive." Dr. Jennifer Chen had warned Maya about the social dynamics of graduate school, particularly the way that informal hierarchies based on undergraduate prestige could affect everything, from funding opportunities to faculty attention. "Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong here," she'd advised. "You were admitted because of your potential, not your pedigree." Maya's first seminar, Contemporary American Fiction and Social class, felt like validation of her decision to pursue graduate study. The reading list included many authors she'd discovered during her undergraduate years, but now she was engaging with them at a level of sophistication that thrilled her intellectual curiosity. Her fellow students were smart and well-prepared, but Maya quickly realized that her perspective brought something unique to discussions. When the class analyzed a Jennifer Egan story about economic anxiety among middle-class professionals, Maya was the only student who pointed out how the narrative assumptions reflected the author's own class position. The story treats job loss as a temporary setback rather than a systematic threat, she observed. That perspective only makes sense if you've never experienced poverty as a generational condition. Professor Martinez, who led the seminar, nodded thoughtfully. That's a crucial distinction, Maya. Can you elaborate on how that assumption shapes the story's resolution? Maya felt the familiar thrill of intellectual engagement, the sense that her voice was not just welcome but necessary in these conversations. Despite her financial struggles and social isolation, she was exactly where she belonged, in a room full of smart people, grappling with complex ideas about literature, society, and human experience. The teaching assistantship began in Maya's second week when she was assigned to lead discussion sections for an introductory literature course. Standing in front of Northwestern undergraduates for the first time, Maya felt the weight of her journey from Central State scholarship student to graduate instructor at a prestigious university. These students, many from privileged backgrounds, were looking to her for guidance and expertise. Literature, Maya told her first class, echoing words she'd heard from Professor Williams years earlier, is not just about beautiful language or clever plots. It's about understanding different ways of experiencing the world, especially experiences that might be different from your own. As autumn deepened into winter, Maya established routines that would sustain her through the next several years. She woke early to grade papers before her own classes, spent afternoons in the library working on seminar assignments, and devoted evenings to her teaching preparations. Social activities were limited by both time and money, but Maya found intellectual fulfillment in her coursework and growing confidence in her abilities as both student and instructor. The imposter syndrome that had plagued her early weeks at TU Northwestern began to fade as Maya's contributions to seminars gained recognition from both faculty and fellow students. Her final paper for Professor Martinez's class, an analysis of how economic anxiety manifested in contemporary fiction by working-class authors, earned praise for its sophisticated theoretical framework and compelling argument. By spring semester, Maya had begun to envision her dissertation project, a comprehensive study of how social class influenced not just literary content but literary reception, examining why certain voices gained canonical status while others remained marginalized. It was ambitious research that would require years of careful scholarship, but Maya felt ready for the challenge. The girl who had once been dismissed for attending a nobody public university was discovering that her perceived disadvantages were actually sources of strength. Her perspective, hard-won through years of navigating economic uncertainty and social exclusion, brought authenticity and insight to academic discussions that often remained abstract for more privileged scholars. Maya was beginning to understand that she hadn't just gained admission to graduate school, she had found her calling. Maya's third year at Northwestern University marked a turning point that she would later recognize as the moment everything changed. Her dissertation proposal, Economic Class and Narrative Authority in 21st Century American Literature, had been approved after months of intensive research and revision. Dr. Jennifer Chen, now her dissertation director, had pushed Maya to think bigger, to challenge assumptions that even progressive literary scholars took for granted. You're not just analyzing literature anymore, Dr. Chen had told her during one of their weekly meetings. You're exposing the systems that determine whose stories get told and whose voices are considered authoritative. This is groundbreaking work, Maya. The research had consumed Maya's life for the past year. Her tiny studio apartment had transformed into a makeshift archive with books stacked on every surface and note cards covering one entire wall. She'd spent countless hours in Northwestern's library, requesting obscure texts through interlibrary loan, tracking down interviews with authors whose backgrounds mirrored her own, and analyzing publication patterns that revealed systemic biases in American literary culture. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly dreary February afternoon. Maya was examining rejection letters that working-class authors had shared publicly, looking for patterns in the language used by publishers and agents. One phrase kept appearing: "We don't feel this story will resonate with our readership." Maya cross-referenced these rejections with demographic data about publishing industry professionals and discovered something remarkable. The same stories that were deemed unmarketable by predominantly upper-class gatekeepers often became bestsellers when published by smaller presses or self-published online. Her hands trembled as she typed her findings into what would become the most important chapter of her dissertation. She wasn't just documenting literary bias. She was proving that economic background influenced not just what stories were written, but which ones were deemed worthy of publication and academic study. Dr. Chen's reaction to the chapter was immediate and enthusiastic. "Maya, this is the kind of scholarship that changes conversations. You're not just participating in literary criticism, you're revolutionizing it." The validation meant everything to Maya, especially during a period when her financial situation had become increasingly precarious. Her teaching assistantship barely covered basic expenses, and her mother's health problems had required expensive treatments that insurance didn't fully cover. Maya had been sending what little money she could spare back to Ohio, often leaving herself with ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for weeks at a time. Her social isolation had also intensified during the dissertation years, while other graduate students formed study groups and attended department parties. Maya worked evening shifts tutoring undergraduates to supplement her income. She watched from the sidelines as her cohort built relationships that would become professional networks, knowing that her economic circumstances prevented her from participating in the informal socializing that was an invisible but crucial part of academic culture. But Maya's research was beginning to attract attention beyond Northwestern. Dr. Chen had encouraged her to submit a paper based on her dissertation work to the Modern Language Association Conference, the most prestigious gathering in literary studies. Maya's proposal, The Economics of Literary Authority, How Class Background Shapes Publication and Reception, was accepted for a panel on emerging voices in American literature. The conference was held in Chicago, a stroke of luck that meant Maya could attend without expensive travel costs. She borrowed a professional outfit from a fellow graduate student and spent her last $40 on transportation and conference registration. Standing outside the Palmer House Hotel, watching hundreds of professors and graduate students stream through the lobby, Maya felt the familiar mixture of excitement and intimidation that had characterized every major milestone in her academic journey. Her presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Saturday, competing against dozens of other panels for audience attention. Maya had rehearsed her 20-minute talk dozens of times, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of standing before an audience of established scholars, presenting research that challenged fundamental assumptions about their field. "Good afternoon," Maya began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I want to start with a question that might make some of us uncomfortable. What if the American literary canon reflects not artistic merit, but economic privilege?" The room, which had started with perhaps 30 attendees, began to fill as word spread about the compelling presentation in progress. Maya's research was meticulous, her arguments carefully constructed, and her delivery passionate without being defensive. She presented data showing how authors from working-class backgrounds faced systematic barriers at every stage of the publishing process, from agent representation to review coverage to academic inclusion. "When we teach American literature," Maya continued, "we're not just sharing great writing. We're perpetuating a system that privileges certain voices while marginalizing others. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" The response was electric. During the question and answer period, established professors peppered Maya with challenging inquiries that she fielded with confidence and sophistication. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Columbia University, a renowned scholar whose work Maya had studied extensively, approached after the session. "Ms. Rodriguez, that was exceptional scholarship," Dr. Mitchell said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had shaped the field for decades. "Have you considered submitting your work to PMLA? This is exactly the kind of research that needs wider circulation." PMLA, Publications of the Modern Language Association, was the most prestigious journal in literary studies. Maya had dreamed of publishing there someday, but she'd assumed it would take years to develop the credentials and connections necessary for acceptance. Dr. Mitchell's encouragement felt like validation from the highest levels of her field. The conference marked the beginning of a cascade of opportunities that would transform Maya's academic trajectory. Her presentation had been recorded and uploaded to the MLA website, where it gained unexpected attention from scholars around the country. Within weeks, Maya was receiving emails from professors who wanted to discuss her research, invitations to contribute to special journal issues, and speaking requests from universities looking for fresh perspectives on American literature. Dr. Chen encouraged Maya to embrace these opportunities while maintaining focus on her dissertation. "This is how academic careers are built," she explained. "Your work is resonating because it's both rigorous and necessary. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not ready for this level of engagement." Maya's first major publication appeared in American Literature, a top-tier journal that had initially intimidated her with its reputation for theoretical sophistication. Her article, Voices from the Margins, Economic Class and Literary Authority in Contemporary Fiction, underwent rigorous peer review that pushed her thinking in productive directions. When the acceptance letter arrived, Maya called her mother immediately. "Mija, they're going to publish your writing in a real magazine." Rosa's voice carried wonder and pride. "Not exactly a magazine, Mama, but yes, it's a journal that professors and graduate students read all over the country. It means other scholars think my work is important." The publication brought Maya to the attention of hiring committees at research universities. It was becoming clear that her dissertation would position her well for the academic job market, despite her unconventional path to graduate school. Dr. Chen had already begun suggesting potential postdoctoral opportunities and hinting at job openings that might suit Maya's interests and qualifications. But success brought new challenges. Maya's increased visibility in academic circles made her more aware of the networks and social capital that she still lacked. Conference invitations required travel expenses she couldn't afford. Networking events assumed disposable income for dinners and drinks. The informal conversations that led to collaboration opportunities often happened in settings where Maya felt economically excluded. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was becoming an expert on how class background affected literary careers while experiencing those very barriers in her own professional development. But Maya had learned to transform obstacles into insights, using her continued financial struggles as data points that enriched her scholarly understanding. Her dissertation defense was scheduled for April, nearly 5 years after she'd arrived at Northwestern with 2 suitcases and desperate hope. The committee consisted of 5 professors, including Dr. Chen and 2 external examiners who had flown in specifically to evaluate Maya's work. Sitting in the seminar room where she'd once felt like an imposter, Maya faced 3 hours of intensive questioning about research that had consumed her life for the past 3 years. "Ms. Rodriguez," the external examiner from Harvard began, "your work makes bold claims about systematic bias in American literary culture. How do you respond to critics who might argue that you're confusing correlation with causation?" Maya had anticipated this challenge. "Thank you for that question, Professor Davis. My research goes beyond correlation by examining specific mechanisms of exclusion, from agent query letters to editorial correspondence to review patterns. I've documented not just disparities in representation, but the explicit reasoning used to justify those disparities." For the next 2 hours, Maya defended every aspect of her methodology, interpretation, and conclusions. The committee probed weak points in her argument, challenged her theoretical framework, and pushed her to consider alternative explanations for the patterns she'd identified. But Maya had done her homework thoroughly, and her responses demonstrated both deep knowledge of her subject and sophisticated understanding of broader scholarly conversations. When the committee dismissed her for their private deliberation, Maya sat in the hallway trying to process what had just happened. 5 years of graduate school, 3 years of intensive dissertation research, and a lifetime of proving herself had led to this moment. Either she would emerge as Dr. Maya Rodriguez, prepared to launch an academic career, or she would face the devastating prospect of failing at the highest level she'd ever attempted. Dr. Chen emerged from the conference room after what felt like hours, but had been only 30 minutes. Her smile told Maya everything she needed to know before she spoke the words. "Congratulations, Dr. Rodriguez. Your committee was unanimous. This is exceptional scholarship that makes a significant contribution to the field." Maya's legs felt weak as the committee members filed out, each offering congratulations and expressing enthusiasm for her future work. Professor Davis, whose questions had been particularly challenging, shook her hand warmly. "Dr. Rodriguez, I want you to know that this is some of the most important work I've seen in decades. You're not just documenting problems, you're providing a roadmap for solutions. This research will influence how we think about American literature for years to come." That evening, Maya called her mother from her tiny apartment, now officially Dr. Maya Rodriguez. The conversation was brief. Rosa was working a double shift at the office building, but the pride in her voice was unmistakable. "Your father would be so proud, Mija. We always knew you were meant for great things." Maya looked around her apartment, still sparsely furnished, still reflecting the financial constraints that had shaped her entire academic journey. But something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the scholarship girl from Central State University, no longer the uncertain graduate student trying to prove she belonged. She was Dr. Maya Rodriguez, a scholar whose work was already influencing conversations in her field, whose voice had become authoritative on questions of class, literature, and social justice. The job market awaited, with all its challenges and opportunities, but Maya faced it now with credentials that spoke for themselves and research that had already begun to change how scholars thought about American literature. The girl who had been laughed at for choosing a public university was about to become Professor Rodriguez, ready to shape the next generation of literary scholars. The job market in English literature had been brutal, even for someone with Maya's impressive credentials. Dr. Maya Rodriguez spent the entire fall semester of her final year at Northwestern sending applications to universities across the country, each one requiring customized cover letters, teaching, statements, and research proposals that took days to perfect. The academic job market operated on a timeline that seemed designed to maximize anxiety. Applications due in October, interviews in January, campus visits in February and March, with final decisions often delayed until April or May. Maya had applied to 47 positions, ranging from elite research universities to small liberal arts colleges to regional state schools. Her dissertation advisor, Dr. Jennifer Chen, had been optimistic about Maya's prospects. "Your work is groundbreaking, your publications are impressive, and your teaching evaluations are outstanding," she'd assured Maya during one of their final meetings. "The job market is difficult for everyone, but you have exactly the kind of profile that search committees are looking for." The first round of interviews took place at the Modern Language Association conference in January, the same venue where Maya had first presented her research 3 years earlier. This time, she arrived in Chicago with a professional wardrobe purchased with her last credit card and a portfolio of materials that documented her transformation from uncertain graduate student to emerging scholar. The interview process was grueling. 30-minute conversations with search committees in cramped hotel rooms, each one probing different aspects of her research, teaching philosophy, and fit with their particular institution. Maya had learned to tailor her responses to each school's culture and needs, emphasizing her research innovations for R1 universities and her teaching commitment for primarily undergraduate institutions. Columbia University had been her dream job, an assistant professor position in English literature with a focus on contemporary American fiction and social class. The department was prestigious, the research resources were unparalleled, and the location in New York City offered access to the literary world that Maya studied. When the email arrived inviting her for a campus visit, Maya read it 5 times before allowing herself to believe it was real. The campus visit in March was unlike anything Maya had experienced. Columbia flew her to New York, put her up in a Manhattan hotel, and arranged 2 days of meetings with faculty, administrators, and graduate students. She gave a job talk based on her dissertation research to a packed auditorium, fielding questions from professors whose work had shaped her own intellectual development. Dr. Rodriguez, one faculty member said after her presentation, "Your research challenges some fundamental assumptions about how we construct literary canons. How do you envision implementing these insights in the classroom?" Maya's response drew on her years of teaching experience at Northwestern, but also on her deeper understanding of how students from different backgrounds experienced literature. "I believe we need to expand not just what we teach, but how we teach it," she explained. When students see their own experiences reflected in literature, they become more engaged readers and more sophisticated thinkers about social issues. The teaching demonstration went equally well. Maya led a seminar on contemporary short fiction for Columbia undergraduates, facilitating a discussion that examined how authors from different economic backgrounds approached similar themes. The students were engaged and thoughtful, asking questions that demonstrated genuine intellectual curiosity, but it was the informal conversations that revealed the most about Columbia's interest in Maya's candidacy. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the department chair who had first encouraged Maya to submit her work to PMLA, was frank about the search committee's enthusiasm. "Maya, you represent exactly the kind of scholar we need," Dr. Mitchell said over coffee in her office overlooking the campus quad. "Your research is innovative, your teaching is exceptional, and your perspective brings something essential to our department. We've been looking for someone who can help us think more critically about whose voices we privilege in American literature." Maya left New York cautiously optimistic but tried to manage her expectations. The academic job market was notoriously unpredictable, with decisions often influenced by factors beyond a candidate's control. She had other campus visits scheduled and couldn't afford to put all her hopes in one opportunity, no matter how perfect it seemed. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in April while Maya was grading final papers in her Northwestern office. "Dr." Mitchell's voice was warm but professional. "Maya, I'm delighted to offer you the position of Assistant Professor of English Literature at Columbia University, beginning fall 2025. Maya's hands shook as she wrote down the details. Salary, benefits, research support, teaching load. It was everything she had worked toward for the past decade. Validation of every sacrifice and struggle since her first day at Central State University. When she hung up the phone, Maya sat in stunned silence before allowing herself to cry with relief and joy. The news transformed everything about how Maya saw her future. She would be moving to New York City, joining the faculty at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, with resources and opportunities that she had only dreamed about during her graduate student years. Her mother's reaction was characteristically emotional and proud. "Misha, I can't believe it," Rosa sobbed during their phone call. "My daughter, a professor at a famous university in New York. Your father would be so proud he'd probably cry too." Maya spent the spring semester finishing her dissertation revisions and preparing for the transition to Columbia. She defended her final dissertation draft in May, with committee members praising work that was already influencing conversations in their field. Dr. Chen organized a small celebration in the department, acknowledging Maya's achievement and the example she'd set for other graduate students from non-traditional backgrounds. "Maya has shown us that excellence can emerge from unexpected places," Dr. Chen said during her brief remarks. "Her success reminds us why we need diverse voices in academic conversations." But before Maya could fully embrace her new identity as Professor Rodriguez, she faced an unexpected reckoning with her past. The invitation to her 10-year high school reunion arrived via Facebook message, forwarded by her former classmate Jessica Williams, who had somehow tracked down Maya's contact information. "OMG Maya, can you believe it's been 10 years? The reunion committee is trying to reach everyone from our class. You have to come. It would be so fun to catch up and see what everyone is doing now." XOXO Maya stared at the reunion invitation, memories flooding back from a time that felt simultaneously distant and immediate. Jefferson High School, class of 2015, seemed like another lifetime. She remembered the conversations about college applications, the casual dismissal of her safety school choice, the assumption that her economic background limited her potential. The Reunion was scheduled for Saturday, June 21st at the Marriott in downtown Cleveland, the same hotel where her wealthier classmates had held their prom after party while Maya worked a dinner shift at the local diner. The irony wasn't lost on her that she could now afford the weekend trip that would have been financially impossible during her college years. Maya almost didn't attend. Her new life at Columbia represented such a departure from her Ohio origins that returning seemed like a step backward. But something pulled her toward the confrontation with her past, perhaps a desire to demonstrate that the quiet girl who had been dismissed 10 years earlier had exceeded every expectation. She drove to Cleveland in her Honda Civic, the same car she'd driven throughout graduate school, now with 200,000 miles and a trunk full of boxes from her Northwestern office. Maya had splurged on a new dress for the occasion, something professional but not ostentatious, and she'd gotten her hair cut at a salon rather than the discount chain she'd relied on for years. The Marriott lobby buzzed with the energy of middle-aged nostalgia. Maya recognized faces that had aged 10 years, bodies that had shifted with time and responsibility, but the social dynamics felt eerily familiar. The popular crowd had reconvened near the bar, their conversations punctuated by laughter and references to shared experiences. The athletes clustered around high-top tables, comparing their current lives to their former glory. The academic achievers networked in quieter corners, discussing careers and accomplishments with subtle competitiveness. Maya approached the registration table where Jessica Williams, now Jessica Miller, squealed with genuine enthusiasm. "Maya, oh my God, you look amazing. I can't believe you came." "Thanks for tracking me down," Maya replied, accepting the name. Tag that read, Maya Rodriguez, Central State University class of 2019. The designation felt like a time capsule, reducing her to an identity she'd transcended years ago. "So what are you up to these days?" Jessica asked, her tone carrying the casual interest of someone making small talk. "I remember you were doing graduate school or something." "I just finished my PhD at Northwestern," Maya said simply. "I'm starting as a professor at Columbia University in the fall." Jessica's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine surprise. "Columbia? Like Columbia University in New York? That's incredible. What do you teach?" "English literature, with a focus on contemporary American fiction and social class issues." The conversation attracted attention from nearby classmates who began gathering around the registration table. Maya found herself fielding questions about her academic career, her research, and her upcoming position at Columbia. Each answer seemed to generate more surprise and interest. "Maya Rodriguez, a voice called from behind her. She turned to see David Chen, no relation to her dissertation advisor, who had been valedictorian of their graduating class. David had attended Harvard on a full merit scholarship and now worked as a management consultant in Boston. He'd been one of the few classmates who had never dismissed Maya's academic potential, though they'd rarely spoken during high school. "David, good to see you," Maya replied genuinely. "I heard you just got a position at Columbia. That's fantastic. I actually did my undergraduate thesis on economic inequality in American literature. Your work sounds fascinating." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of someone Maya had hoped to avoid, Tyler Morrison, whose family owned the largest car dealership in their hometown. Tyler had attended Duke University, largely due to his father's alumni connections and substantial donations, and had returned to Ohio to join the family business. During high school, he'd been particularly vocal about Maya's realistic college choice. Well, Maya Rodriguez," Tyler said with the same condescending smile she remembered from a decade earlier. "I heard you're still in school. When are you going to get a real job?" The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Maya felt the familiar flush of anger and embarrassment, but also something new. The quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and what she'd accomplished. "I finished school, actually," Maya replied calmly. "I'll be starting as a professor at Columbia University this fall." Tyler's smile faltered slightly. "Teaching? That's nice. I guess some people are satisfied with modest goals." Maya felt David Chen stiffen beside her, and Jessica Miller's face showed obvious discomfort with the awkward turn in conversation. But Maya had faced hostile questions from dissertation committees and skeptical conference audiences. Tyler Morrison no longer had the power to intimidate her. "Columbia is actually one of the most prestigious universities in the world," Maya said, her voice remaining level and professional. "It's where I'll be conducting research on economic class and literary representation, examining how social background influences whose stories get told and whose voices are considered authoritative." The educational undertone wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Maya wasn't just correcting Tyler's misunderstanding, she was demonstrating the kind of intellectual sophistication that came from years of rigorous academic training. "That sounds really important," Jessica interjected, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. "I had no idea you were doing such high-level research." The conversation gradually shifted to safer topics, but word of Maya's achievement spread through the reunion like ripples across water. She found herself approached by classmates who wanted to hear about her academic journey, her research, and her upcoming position at Columbia. Some expressed genuine admiration, others seemed motivated by curiosity about how the quiet scholarship student had surpassed their own accomplishments. Maya reconnected with Angela Foster, a former classmate, who had become a social worker after graduating from Ohio State University. Angela had always been thoughtful and kind, and their conversation felt authentic rather than performative. "I always knew you were brilliant," Angela said as they sat at a quiet table away from the main crowd. "But I had no idea you were doing such groundbreaking work. It sounds like you're really making a difference." "Thank you," Maya replied. "It's been a long journey, but I love what I do, and it feels meaningful to study issues that connect to real people's lives." The evening's program included a slideshow of graduation photos and a memorial segment for classmates who had died in the past decade. Maya looked at her 18-year-old self in the graduation picture, serious, determined, but with no conception of how dramatically her life would change. That girl had hoped for college success but couldn't have imagined standing in front of packed auditoriums, publishing in prestigious journals, or joining the faculty at Columbia University. During the dinner portion of the evening, Maya found herself seated at a table with several classmates she hadn't known well in high school. The conversations ranged from career updates to family news to reminiscences about shared experiences. Maya contributed when appropriate but mostly listened, struck by how different her path had been from the more conventional trajectories of marriage, children, and steady employment that characterized many of her classmates' lives. "Maya, can I ask you something?" said Lisa Park, who had attended Northwestern University for her undergraduate degree and now worked as a marketing manager in Chicago. "I remember in high school when you chose Central State University over some other options. Did you ever regret that decision?" Maya considered the question carefully. "Not for a second," she replied honestly. "Central State gave me exactly what I needed. Outstanding professors who believed in my potential, financial support that made college possible, and the foundation for everything that came after. I couldn't have asked for a better undergraduate experience." The response prompted nods of understanding from several classmates who had also attended state schools and built successful careers. Maya realized that her defensive feelings about her college choice had long since evolved into genuine pride in the path she'd taken. As the evening wound down, Maya found herself in one final conversation with Tyler Morrison, who approached her near the coat check. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by something that might have been respect, or at least acknowledgement. "Maya, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice lacking its usual bluster. "I was out of line earlier. What you've accomplished is really impressive." Maya studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity, but finding what appeared to be genuine recognition. "Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate that. Can I ask, how did you know? In high school, I mean. How did you know you wanted to pursue all this academic stuff?" The question was more thoughtful than Maya had expected from Tyler. "I didn't know exactly where it would lead," she answered honestly. "I just knew I loved learning and wanted to keep doing it. Everything else followed from that." Tyler nodded slowly. "Well, congratulations. I mean it." Maya drove back to her mother's house that night with a profound sense of closure. The reunion had provided something she hadn't expected. Not just vindication of her choices, but genuine connection with classmates who appreciated her journey. She'd faced the people who had once dismissed her potential and demonstrated through quiet dignity that she'd exceeded every expectation. More importantly, Maya realized that she no longer needed their validation. The girl who had been laughed at for choosing a safety school had become Dr. Maya Rodriguez, incoming professor at Columbia University, scholar of national reputation, and voice for students whose backgrounds mirrored her own. The laughter had stopped long ago, replaced by respect, admiration, and the recognition that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected places. As she pulled into her mother's driveway, Maya smiled at the irony. Tomorrow she would begin preparing for her new life in New York City, her office at Columbia University, and her role in shaping the next generation of literary scholars. But tonight, she was simply Maya Rodriguez from East Cleveland, coming home to tell her mother about the evening when her past and future finally made peace with each other. September arrived in New York City with the crisp promise of new beginnings and the familiar energy of academic renewal. Dr. Maya Rodriguez stood in her new office on the 7th floor of Hamilton Hall at Columbia University, looking out at the campus that had once seemed impossibly distant from her dreams. The Gothic architecture and ivy-covered walls that had intimidated her during her job interview now felt like home, a testament to how dramatically her life had transformed over the past decade. The office itself was modest but well-appointed, with built-in bookshelves that Maya had filled with volumes spanning from canonical American literature to contemporary works by authors from working-class backgrounds. Her desk faced the window, offering a view of the campus quad where students hurried between classes, their conversations mixing languages and perspectives from around the world. On the wall behind her desk hung her doctoral diploma from Northwestern University, alongside a framed photo of her parents from her high school graduation, a reminder of how far she'd traveled from East Cleveland. Maya's course load for her first semester included Introduction to Contemporary American Literature, a survey course that would examine how economic class, race, and gender influenced both the creation and reception of modern fiction. She had spent the summer crafting a syllabus that balanced canonical works with voices that had been marginalized by traditional academic curricula. The reading list included authors like Tobias Wolff and Joyce Carol Oates, alongside newer writers like Jess Walter and Stephanie Powell Watts, creators whose work examined the complexities of American life from perspectives often excluded from elite literary conversations. The preparation had been meticulous. Maya understood that her first semester at Columbia would establish her reputation with both students and colleagues. She had revised her lecture notes dozens of times, anticipating questions and planning discussions that would challenge her students to think critically about literature's relationship to social and economic reality. Her teaching philosophy had evolved during her years at Northwestern, where she'd learned to balance academic rigor with accessibility, ensuring that students from all backgrounds could engage meaningfully with complex texts. The night before her first class, Maya called her mother from her small but elegant apartment on the Upper West Side. Rosa Rodriguez's voice carried a mixture of pride and amazement that her daughter was living in Manhattan, teaching at a university whose name she'd heard mentioned on television news programs. "Mija, I still can't believe it," Rosa said, her voice warm despite the exhaustion that came from working double shifts at the office building downtown. "My daughter, Professor Rodriguez at Columbia University. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure it's real." "It's real, Mama," Maya replied, looking out her apartment window at the city lights stretching toward the horizon. "And tomorrow I start teaching students who might be sitting where we were 10 years ago. Kids who think their backgrounds limit their possibilities." Maya's first class was scheduled for 10:10 a.m. in a lecture hall that could accommodate 80 students. She arrived 30 minutes early, checking the microphone system and arranging her materials while natural light filtered through tall windows that had witnessed decades of Columbia's academic traditions. As students began filing in, Maya observed the mix of faces that reflected the university's diverse student body. Some confident and polished, others appearing nervous or overwhelmed by the transition to college life. Among the students, Maya recognized familiar dynamics from her own educational journey. There were obvious scholarship recipients like Marcus, a young black man from Detroit who clutched his notebook with the intensity she remembered from her own first college classes. There was also Sophia, whose designer clothes and casual confidence suggested the kind of economic privilege that Maya had observed but never experienced. The classroom became a microcosm of American society, with students whose backgrounds spanned from generational wealth to first-generation college attendance. "Good morning," Maya began, her voice carrying the authority that came from years of defending her ideas in graduate seminars and conference presentations. "I want to start with a question that might make some of you uncomfortable. How many of you believe that talent and hard work are enough to succeed in America?" Most hands went up, as Maya had anticipated. These students, regardless of their backgrounds, had achieved enough academic success to gain admission to Columbia University. They still believed in meritocracy because acknowledging the role of systemic inequality would complicate their understanding of their own achievements. "Keep your hands up if you think everyone in America has equal access to opportunities for success," Maya continued. Gradually, hands began dropping as students considered the implications of the question. Maya nodded approvingly at their thoughtfulness. "Over the course of this semester, we're going to examine stories that challenge these assumptions," she explained, walking among the rows of seats with the confidence of someone who belonged in this space. "We'll read authors who succeeded despite systemic barriers and others whose voices were silenced, not because they lacked talent, but because they lacked access to the networks and institutions that shape literary culture." Maya's first assignment surprised many students. Instead of beginning with a canonical text, she asked them to research the publication history of a contemporary author from a working-class background, examining how their economic circumstances had influenced their writing career. The assignment was designed to make visible the usually invisible barriers that shaped literary success. "Professor Rodriguez," asked Sarah, a student whose prep school background was evident in her polished presentation, "why don't we start with the major American writers that we need to know for graduate school applications?" Maya smiled, recognizing the question that revealed assumptions about literature's purpose and value. "That's an excellent question, Sarah. But I want you to consider this. What if the authors we need to know were selected not just because of their literary merit, but because of their access to elite educational and publishing networks? What voices might we be missing when we limit ourselves to traditional canons?" The discussion that followed was exactly what Maya had hoped for: challenging, sometimes uncomfortable, but ultimately productive. Students began questioning assumptions they'd never examined, considering how their own backgrounds might influence their reading experiences and literary preferences. Marcus, the scholarship student from Detroit, offered a perspective that resonated with Maya's own experience. "I never saw my neighborhood or my family's struggles reflected in the books we read in high school. It made me think that literature wasn't for people like me." Sophia, initially defensive about the critique of traditional literary hierarchies, gradually began engaging with the complexity of the issues Maya raised. "I never thought about how my background might give me advantages in understanding certain authors," she admitted during a class discussion of a Tobias Wolff story. "The family dynamics he describes feel familiar to me, but I can see how they might seem foreign to someone from a different class background." Maya's reputation at Columbia grew quickly as word spread about her innovative teaching methods and rigorous but accessible approach to literary analysis. Students praised her ability to make complex theoretical concepts relevant to their lived experiences, and her office hours were consistently booked with students seeking guidance on everything from research projects to career planning. "Professor Rodriguez understands us in a way that other faculty don't," wrote one student in a course evaluation. "She makes you believe that your background is a strength, not something to overcome." Another student noted, "I never realized how much my economic circumstances shaped my reading of literature until taking this class. It's changed how I think about everything." Maya's research continued to gain national attention during her first year at Columbia. Her book, Voices from the Margins: Class and Narrative in Contemporary America, was published by a prestigious university press and became required reading in graduate programs across the country. The work synthesized years of research into a comprehensive analysis of how social class influenced both literary production and reception, providing a theoretical framework that other scholars began adopting in their own work. The book's impact extended beyond academic circles. Maya was invited to speak at literary festivals, public libraries, and community colleges, where her message about expanding access to literary culture resonated with audiences who had often felt excluded from elite cultural conversations. Her TED Talk, Whose Stories Matter, Class, Literature, and the American Dream, was viewed over 1 million times, bringing her research to a broader public audience. The ultimate vindication came during Maya's second semester at Columbia, when she received an unexpected phone call from Harvard University's English department. The same institution that had rejected her graduate school application was now interested in recruiting her as a tenured associate professor, offering a substantial salary increase and enhanced research support. Maya listened politely to the Harvard offer, but her response was immediate and definitive. "Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm exactly where I want to be." The conversation revealed how much Maya's perspective had evolved since her graduate school days. Harvard's prestige no longer held the power to intimidate or tempt her. Columbia had given her the opportunity to prove herself when others wouldn't, and more importantly, she'd found her mission, mentoring students whose backgrounds mirrored her own teenage experience. Maya's most meaningful work happened in her office during student conferences, where she guided first-generation college students through the maze of academic expectations and opportunities. She helped Marcus apply for graduate school, sharing insights about the application process that she'd learned through trial and error. She encouraged Maria, a Latina student from Los Angeles, to consider pursuing a PhD despite family pressure to enter a more immediately lucrative career. "You have a unique perspective that academia needs," Maya told Maria during one of their meetings. "Don't let anyone convince you that your background is a limitation. It's actually your greatest asset." The advice echoed words that Professor Williams had spoken to Maya a decade earlier, demonstrating how mentorship could create ripple effects across generations of students. Maya's third year at Columbia brought recognition that exceeded her wildest, early dreams. She was awarded tenure 2 years ahead of schedule, a rare acknowledgement of exceptional scholarly achievement and institutional value. The Modern Language Association invited her to deliver a keynote address at their annual convention, the same gathering where she'd first presented her research as a nervous graduate student. Standing before an audience of thousands of literary scholars, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 10 years ago, I was told that my public university education would limit my academic potential," she began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had proven every doubter wrong. "Today, I stand before you as evidence that excellence can emerge from unexpected places, that diverse voices strengthen rather than weaken scholarly conversations." The applause was thunderous, but Maya's most profound satisfaction came from seeing young scholars in the audience, graduate students and junior faculty whose backgrounds resembled her own, who saw in her success a model for their own academic aspirations. Maya maintained relationships with many of her former Northwestern classmates and Central State University professors, serving as proof that academic success could follow unconventional paths. She regularly spoke at Central State, encouraging current students to pursue graduate study and assuring them that their public university education provided excellent preparation for advanced academic work. During one visit to her undergraduate alma mater, Maya addressed a packed auditorium of students, many of whom worked multiple jobs while pursuing their degrees. "Your struggles are not obstacles to overcome," she told them. "They're sources of insight that will make you better scholars, better teachers, and better human beings." The standing ovation that followed was deeply moving, but Maya's greatest reward came from the individual conversations with students afterward, young people who saw in her story permission to dream bigger than their circumstances had previously allowed. Maya's personal life had also found balance during her years at Columbia. She'd met David Park, a sociology professor at NYU, at an academic conference focused on social mobility and higher education. Their relationship developed slowly, built on shared intellectual interests and mutual respect for each other's research. David, himself a first-generation college graduate, understood the unique challenges and perspectives that shaped Maya's worldview. "You've changed how I think about literature," David told her during one of their long conversations about their respective fields. Your work has influenced my own research on educational inequality. Maya appreciated having a partner who understood the demands of academic life and shared her commitment to using scholarship to address social issues. Their relationship represented a kind of stability and intellectual companionship that had seemed impossible during her graduate school years of financial struggle and social isolation. On a warm evening in May, as her fourth year at Columbia drew to a close, Maya stood in her office organizing materials for the summer research trip that would inform her next book project. The walls now displayed additional honors: the Columbia University Excellence in Teaching Award, a certificate recognizing her service on the university's Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and photographs from conferences where she delivered invited lectures. Her current research examined how digital publishing and social media were democratizing literary culture, potentially disrupting the traditional gatekeeping mechanisms that had historically excluded working-class voices. The project combined her long-standing interest in class and literature with emerging technologies that might create new opportunities for marginalized writers. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. "Saw your interview in the newspaper, Mija. So proud of you. Dad would be amazed." The interview, published in the New York Times education section, had profiled Maya's work and her upcoming book about digital publishing and literary democracy. The article positioned her as one of the leading scholars examining how technology might expand access to literary culture, research that felt like a natural evolution of her decade-long focus on class and narrative authority. As Maya prepared to leave her office for the day, she paused at the window overlooking the Columbia campus. Students were heading home for the summer, their conversations mixing excitement about internships and research opportunities with nostalgia for the academic year ending. Among them, Maya knew, were students whose backgrounds resembled her own: scholarship recipients, first-generation college students, young people whose dreams exceeded their current circumstances. Maya's journey from Central State University, scholarship student, to Columbia University professor had taken exactly 10 years, but the transformation felt both gradual and revolutionary. The girl who had been laughed at for choosing a safety school had become Dr. Maya Rodriguez, scholar of national reputation, mentor to countless students, and proof that excellence could emerge from the most unlikely places. The laughter had, indeed, stopped long ago, replaced by respect, admiration, and recognition that authentic voices strengthened rather than threatened academic conversations. Maya's success wasn't just personal vindication. It was evidence that higher education at its best could recognize and nurture talent regardless of its origins, creating opportunities for perspectives that might otherwise remain unheard. Walking across the Columbia campus toward the subway station, Maya felt the profound satisfaction of someone who had not only achieved her own dreams, but had opened doors for others to follow. The first-generation college student from East Cleveland had become Professor Rodriguez of Columbia University, ready to spend her career ensuring that other unlikely voices would find their place in the conversations that shaped American culture and society.